Thank you for listening to We Have Ways of Making You Talk. Sign up to our Patreon to receive bonus content, live streams, and our weekly newsletter with money off books and museum visits as well, plus early access to all live show tickets. That's patreon.com/wehaveways.
This summer, click into cordless power with Memorial Day savings at the Home Depot. Tackle more than half an acre of grass with the convenience and gas-like power of the Ryobi 40-volt battery-powered mower. And keep your flower beds fresh with the 40-volt cordless string trimmer. Then clear debris with the 40-volt jet fan leaf blower. Click into Memorial Day savings happening now at your cordless power source, the Home Depot. How doers get more done.
Tally ho, tally ho. Welcome to We Have Ways of Making You Talk. And regular listeners will know that greeting means that we're going planes, aren't we, Jim?
Yeah, we're going aviation. We're going warbirds.
We're going warbirds. And glancing over my left shoulder, and there are the invasion stripes proudly painted on a Mark 9 Spitfire. And because we are at Sywell Aerodrome, aren't we, Jim?
We absolutely are. And let's face it, in 2024, invasion stripes is what you want.
Yeah.
As we recognise our 80th anniversary of Second World War great events. But this is a little bit of a break for us, isn't it? Because we're having just a little... This is like a sort of interval in our D-Day stuff.
Yep.
A trip to... we're going on location. We're with great friend of the show, Richard Grace.
And we actually had to crawl under the wing of a Spitfire to get to where we are right now, on our way in through the building.
The hangar's quite tightly packed.
The hangar is tightly packed.
It's because it's got a Thunderbolt in it. That's the problem.
Yeah, which is a big beast, and we'll talk about that in a bit. On the way up, I was worried about the weather. The weather forecast said it would be rain, and there was a concern about some cloud and all this sort of stuff. But is this the ideal day kind of weather for?
I think it is.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not too hot. It's there's no wind of consequence. So and a bit of cloud. You don't want it to just be bright blue and nothingness. You want a bit of cloud because you can then fly around the clouds.
Yeah.
So no, I'd say you got it just right.
So Richard, very excitingly this June, the Warbird Airshow comes to Sywell.
Absolutely. Yeah,
and
we've booked everything I could think of. So
okay, so come on, some of the highlights. I mean, they're all highlights, obviously. But
it's the 22nd and 23rd of June, and it's a very large gathering of warbirds primarily, but with other stuff for the broader audience, I think it's fair to say. Plenty of stuff going on the ground as well, large display of military vehicles, various setups with reenactors, and we're putting aeroplanes in amongst the reenactors, proper set pieces, not just littering them about the place pretending to be in a trench. We've got a bit of a beer festival as well in our Battle of Britain bar down there, with plenty for the kids to do as well. Bit of a bouncy castle, massive bouncy castle thing, various entertainers about the place, plenty of free-flowing beer and free-flowing food, and a small vintage car rally as well, with about 100 vintage cars, all chosen by the owner of the airfield, who's a bit of an aficionado in these things. And then we're seeing flying from 1 o'clock till right into the evening on the Saturday, actually, and then on the Sunday 1 till 6, with a packed flying display of everything from 10 Spitfires and Mustangs and B-17s and the Flying Bulls with their beautiful polished machines, all the way up to the Red Arrows and some modern aerobatic aeroplanes, wing walking steermen with our friend Danielle, who clambers all over the aeroplane. Some World War I stuff coming all the way over from Sweden. What else is going on? Plenty. A very posh
that sounds like a lot to me.
Yeah, that sounds like plenty.
A very posh VIP tent with free-flowing beer and food and whatever you can think of. And we've got we've got something like 30 traders as well. So basically, basically a shopping centre on wheels.
Big busy weekend of
That's
aircraft,
the plot,
and conviviality.
Yep.
All
and
here
fantastic.
At
We've got a flight line walk as well, so you get access to all the.
Well, that's what I was going to ask, because that's always you get right up close to the planes, smell them. Feel the heat off them.
Making sure that that's as close as you can possibly get without touching them, unfortunately, or maybe you could probably reach over and just get there. But getting and both sides, so you can get to both the front and back of the aeroplane. Whereas at other shows, you can often only walk down one side with a bit of a separation. So no, we're trying to do everything we can to make it the best show we can possibly make it.
But I mean, 10 Spitfires, mighty 8th show. I mean, that's pretty salivating, isn't it?
I think it'll be good. and build in the red arrows and some lighter stuff tailored towards family entertainment than just us spotters.
So red arrows, they'll be flying the flag for Team GB.
That's
yeah,
right.
absolutely. I mean, I just want to, for those, obviously, for those listening, you can't see the state of excitement James is working himself up into at the prospect of these planes.
Well, so Richard made my year by inviting me to come up and share the commentary box with him. So I'm going to be commentating with Richard that weekend. I'm going to get shot for saying this. I'm just a bit more excited about the air show.
Oh, he's in such trouble now. I mean, how do you? I mean, you say you've pulled all this stuff. How do you go about that? You've got a little black book with everyone.
All my mates.
Right.
I mean, I've been doing air shows for my entire existence, really. So
Yeah.
I sort of know everyone. So we were able to, just ring them up and get agreement off them very quickly.
Yeah.
And we were doing that in September, October time, well before we announced the show, just to make sure we had something worth announcing. It should be really good, and hopefully we can put on a good show with all the aeroplanes we've got. It's as much about the person in the aeroplane as it is about the aeroplane with a lot of these things.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you. So, because I'm from a business in which people are very concerned about their billing, and if I'm on a bill with 5 other comedians, well, you want to be top of the bill, but does that mean? And that's the thing in itself. Does that mean appearing first?
It's a good question.
Or do you want to be last?
Well, no one wants to appear at the end because the beer will be long since calling by then.
Right.
Particularly on the Saturday, because we're going into the evening on the Saturday.
Right.
So some poor sapper's going to have to do a nice Spitfire solo display at about 8 p.m. and that'll be the proper short straw job, I'm going to say.
Right, how long are we on Saturday?
Yeah, absolutely, right into the evening.
Fantastic.
Normally we're sort of accustomed to Flying Legends, which is another great warbird air show in this country, which isn't on this year, but historically you sort of fly the Spitfires first because they're so pathetic at cooling themselves down that they need the rest of the day to cool down again so that you can fly them again.
Right.
So you tend to fly them at lunchtime, but also, what better way to introduce an air show than with 10 Spitfires?
And there's an interesting, you see
Just
immediately
never
a
knew that.
practicality that.
Hopeless things.
Well, so you, once you've flown it, you need to sit it down and let it
on
get
a
over
hot day,
itself.
if you've got a sort of 30-degree day or something, it needs a good couple of hours to calm down properly before you can spend any amount of time on the ground again.
But what happens in August 1940 on one of the rare sunny days?
A lot of hot Spitfires.
Okay,
But
August
August
they were
1940, they're not thinking, well, there's an air show next weekend, and we really need to make sure she's running for the air show next weekend.
I know, but you need to make sure you're running the following day.
Oh, crap, there's a young Vishwada coming. We need to shoot them all down.
I think the main thing that we do now
different set of priorities.
that they didn't do then was we panic about the temperature a lot now because we don't want to cook an engine because they're expensive. Whereas if you look at the book figure, it says you can get to sort of a rather frightening, I think it's 125 degrees C on the coolant temperature. Whereas these days, if anyone sees over 100, they just turn it off because we don't want to boil it. Also, if you think, look at Sywell, like it's a massive, for those that haven't been to Sywell, it's a very large grass field. It does have a big hard runway, but it's a large grass field and it's kind of akin to what would have been around in the war.
Yeah.
And you were always able to take off into wind, whereas the biggest problem we've got now is you've always got a taxi to the start of a runway, and it's that taxiing that's the problem. So to just hop in one Spitfire on a 30-degree day, push the start button and fire all the throttle, it won't be hot by then. So it's not so much of a problem.
So that's those of who remember our Battle of Britain series of podcasts, one of the big things with the grass airstrip, of course, is its repairability. We talked about that a lot, that you bulldoze it, you fix it, you put the dirt in the hole and the airstrip is back on. Again, that hadn't occurred to me that it means you can take off into the wind in any direction.
Yeah.
Wherever the wind is, you can get a plane
Which is
up.
it's what I always say is more difficult about our job flying these things these days, is we've always got crosswinds to contend with.
Yeah.
Because we're always having to land on a runway, and that runway very rarely points into wind. Whereas if you somewhere like here in a Spitfire, you'll happily land here just into wind if it's a windy
Coming
day.
on the wind side.
And it's so easy by comparison. It really is.
There's always something to learn, isn't there, Jim?
There is, but why? So, but can you just not? I mean, do you have to land on the runway, or can you just?
Places now, I've only got one runway because land's expensive and they're not making any more of it. People like to build houses on it and things like that.
Yeah.
So it's very
Or
rare.
house asylum seekers.
It's very rare to find a big bit of grass like this that's still an airfield. Normally it's been cut down to just being one runway, and that runway is the runway you land on.
Also, I suppose that nowadays people are not used to flying in on a grass strip in the wind, so they're keyed to the idea of an airfield.
Definitely,
with an airstrip with an actual runway.
People
And
love a runway and a runway line and a taxiway marker and all that kind of stuff. Personally, I hate it, but you're taught to love it. You know, it's ingrained in your brain when you're taught to fly these days.
So when you're putting the kind of the program together, is that just your decision, or is there a committee of people all arguing the toss over it?
No, it was pretty much just my decision.
Okay, so
I think normally there'd be a committee, but in this situation, it was, you know, obviously others had input, and I sought a lot of people whose opinion I care about and asked them what they'd want to see in case I was missing something. Things like that Fokker D21 from Holland, that was something that a friend of mine, Nigel Hitchman, he just said, I said to him, what would you like to see? He was stood in my office, and he's seen just about every aeroplane there is in the world. He's usually got a photo of them as well, and he said, I'd really like to see that Fokker D21 from Holland. Like, I didn't even know that was a thing. Lo and behold, first UK outing for it, first outing outside of Holland.
Wow. And there's the B-17.
Yep. And a landing here as well, which will be really cool.
Oh, wow. Where does that come from? Where's
only
that
from Duxford.
Oh, it's from Duxford.
Yeah,
it's
not far,
going at Duxford.
But
right.
it's just, you'll be able to get properly close to it here when it's...
And smell it.
And so, yeah, exactly. And get covered in oil if you get under it.
Well, those radials. So, Richard, when did this kind of passion for air shows first enter the fray? Because there used to be the kind of sort of Hendon Air pageant, didn't there, and things like that?
It sort of came about from the development of new aeroplanes, didn't it? For, you know, you had places like Farnborough and stuff like that, where if you made your TSR2 or your Saunders Roe SRA1 flying boat, you might take it to Farnborough and
show it to the
everyone, look,
crash it on the public.
That was
because the thing is, it is a really interesting history, isn't it? Because you read people's lots of pilots' accounts during the war. They said, I went to Hendon, I saw an air show, I was bitten by the flying bug. It's a big part of, you know, aviation being sexy between the wars. And then after the wars, it's the jet age, you know. And Farnborough
and Rowley Falk in his pinstripe suit,
exactly,
barrel rolling
huge crowds,
Vulcan on takeoff,
all that stuff, right? But Farnborough doesn't. You know, those things have sort of gone away, haven't they? So this is
still a big thing, though, isn't it? But it's much
every,
more commercial.
I think it's
that's the point. It's not annual, and
it's now an airliner show, which is great if you like airliners, and it's horses for courses, isn't it?
But no one's barrel rolling A380s, are they?
Not in plain sight, no. Probably having a go. I'd have a go. But no, the days of really pushing
the computer says no, I think.
The days of really pushing it are gone unless you go to France. The current Airbus A400M military display for France is I tried to get it here actually, but we couldn't, but it's very, very exciting indeed, and I recommend it to anyone.
Will they throw it about?
Oh yes. I didn't know I didn't know the onboard computer would let it do that actually, but it's very, very exciting. But no, I think, you know, as you rightly say, a lot of the wartime guys, a passion for aviation came from seeing either an air show or an air race, of course, which was a big interwar thing, and a lot of people got into the
of course, the Schneider Trophy and everything.
Schneider Trophy, and again, you know, all of our American friends, I think you'll find most of the slightly older, very competent guys were air racing guys.
Reno.
You know, Jimmy Doolittle, for example, who's a big air racing guy. Here goes a Spitfire.
Yep. Wow. It's just always good, isn't it? It's always good.
It doesn't really ever sound bad, does it?
No.
When it's up off the ground, you're not having to look over the nose anymore, are you? Like the vision opens up, the tail comes up, and you can see.
And the faster it goes, the more it opens up, basically. Right. You know, it's only doing about 140 knots there, so it's still quite nose high.
Yeah.
But by the time it gets to 200 knots, it's very good indeed.
Right. And so at an air show, what do you tell the pilot? What can you tell the pilot to do? What can the pilot do? And what do you do?
There's a bit of it, and it's something we're trying to correct here at Sywell. So if with our 10 Spitfires, for example, what one would inherently do with 10 Spitfires is put 10 Spitfires in the air together, and they'd all fly past, and everyone would go, "Isn't it wonderful, 10 Spitfires?" The problem is,
I mean, they would do that. Yeah, maybe an R.
The real problem is you've got a Mark 5 in there, a Mark 9, and a Mark 14, and you've got to cater for the lowest common denominator. And as lovely as a Merlin Spitfire is. A Griffin Spitfire is quite significantly faster than it.
And how do you compare a kind of, a Griffin with, let's say, a Mark 1 Spitfire?
Yeah, it's just, I mean, I still think it's amazing that you can take a 900 horsepower Spitfire and put a 2,000 horsepower engine on the front of it, and it still flies really nicely. But
yes, it kind of doesn't make any sense. It
doesn't really add up, does it? And they really didn't change very much at all. But what we're trying to do is, of course, have the 10 Spitfires moment, but then split it up into what those aeroplanes are good at. So, we've got 2 Mark 14 Spitfires, so they're going to be in the moment and then immediately go away and hang out and climb for height and all that good stuff, while a few Mark 9s thrash around doing Mark 90 stuff, and then some Mark 5s will come in and do some nice formation aerobatics. And then at the end, a couple of Mark 14s are going to come in as fast as you can possibly see us and just get stuck in.
Wow.
Why wouldn't you want to see that, people?
Exactly. And as a pilot, why wouldn't you want to do that?
Yeah.
So that's the kind of thing that we're trying to do. It's not just going to be a sort of Duxford air show at Sywell. It's going to be.
I mean, you say they're different aircraft. Fundamentally that you've got 900 horsepower to 2,000.
Yep.
What's the difference for the pilot?
Amazingly, I was actually discussing this yesterday when we were watching the Mark 14 that we fly at Duxford, which also notably not present is the wingtips. And amazingly, it still flies just like a Spitfire. I mean, I've not flown the Mark 1. The earliest Spitfire I've flown is a Mark 5, which is similar. The only thing that changes is the speed that everything happens at. So by the time you've got a Griffin in the front and no wingtips, you need to add 10 knots to everything. So you'll land 10 knots faster and you'll climb 10 knots faster, but it notably goes about 40 knots faster. So it's a huge increase in performance. The main thing you notice with a Griffin is just how unbelievably quickly it climbs. I mean, it's what it was designed to do. That's why it's got that massive...
kind of 40,000 feet in
it's
12 minutes or something, can't it?
It's 4,500 feet a minute from memory, the rate of climb, which is twice what a Mustang will climb at.
Really?
Yeah,
so that is 40,000 feet.
Because it's a much bigger lump than the Mustang anyway.
Yeah, and it's a lighter aeroplane. It's got less... I mean, it's that age-old thing. It's, that's an escort fighter and a Spitfire's an interceptor.
Yeah.
And I guess best we don't confuse the two.
Yeah.
But it is easy to compare them, isn't it?
Well, I mean, well, kind of, why wouldn't you? I mean, you sit them alongside each other and you aren't aware of those subtleties. You might not see them,
They look fundamentally the same, don't they? So, but no, the Mark 14 is... The first time I flew one, I was laughing out loud in the cockpit because it's just such a different experience. But it feels so familiar because everything in the cockpit's still a Spitfire, and yet this thing up the front is just making this racket that you can't. Nothing's going to drown it out. If you could get a second set of earplugs in your ears, you would. Take some as tablets just to see if that helps. But no, they're amazing things. They really are.
And so that's what you're doing with the Spitfire. So is it 6 Mustangs?
6 Mustangs.
So what are they going to do?
So we're going to, I don't want a spoiler alert. I don't want to spoil it, but think of a big scenario with a B-17 and some Mustangs and a Thunderbolt and a couple of baddies.
All right. All right.
What might you do with that?
Absolutely.
That's teasing me enough. That's fine.
Yeah. No, there's, we've tried to think about, for example, you regularly see lots of Hurricanes fly past and everyone goes, because Hurricanes are nice, aren't they? But what you don't see is a Hurricane doing what a Hurricane's actually really very capable of, which is being a fighter, and manoeuvring it, just simply because they tend to do it at a slightly lower speed than everything else. So instead of having 7 Hurricanes flying past, we just got 2 Hurricanes, and they're going to fly around together, be manoeuvrable fundamentally.
Wow.
Fantastic. Well, it does sound like you're kind of doing things a little bit differently from the normal
trying to
other air shows.
Yeah, we might have got it completely wrong. It could be a total disaster.
It sounds absolutely fantastic.
It does. It sounds amazing.
Well, I think we should have a little, because it's always lovely to come here and see all the warbirds around, and you've got gaggle of Spitfires. There's a P-47 having a few last minute checks
as well. There's a
109
everywhere.
There's a 109.
Yeah,
which you reckon will be flying before the year is out.
It's supposed to be.
Right, there we are. Well, let's take a break, and after the break, you'll have the sound of us prodding aircraft in the hangar. How about that? See you in a tick. Welcome back to Weird Ways of Making You Talk. On location at Sywell. We're going in the hangar now, aren't we, Jim?
Yeah, we are. And the first thing that catches my eye is the fuselage of the ME-109, which I know you're developing, Richard. And we were having a little bit of a chat about this earlier on, weren't we? But it's fascinating because you're not filled with blueprints and...
We are.
Oh, you are filled with blueprints?
Oh, they're everywhere.
Oh, right,
We're sick
okay.
of the sight of them. It's just we don't leave them out. But there's, we've always got the most useful thing with the Germans, as one might expect, did a cracking job of making all the paperwork. And the illustrated parts catalogue for this aeroplane, i.e. the parts book, where one might look to see if one needs a bolt, that's where you'd find out which bolt it was, is unbelievably good. And that's what we're using. We've got the benefit of having started with something resembling an aeroplane. So a lot of it we're, taking apart and putting back together again.
Right.
Utilising that parts catalogue. It's only when we need to make something for that we need to replace that we have to get the drawings out. We've got about 15,000 drawings, which is not quite all of them, but it's enough to do the job.
And what's the provenance of this aircraft?
This is an F4, so it'll be as long as we finish it relatively quickly, the first and only flying F since the war. It's a JG-54 aeroplane, a Green Hearts aeroplane. We've still got the piece of skin with the green heart on it, which is pretty awesome. And it had an engine problem, as a lot of them did, and ended up getting put down in a field in Russia. Fairly typical, set the cockpit on fire to burn all the radio equipment, which of course the fuel tanks, I say of course, not obvious to everyone, is it? The fuel tank's directly underneath the cockpit, so fire in cockpit equals fire in fuel tank equals somewhat bigger fire. So the cockpit burns out, pilot walks off, and then it got recovered in, I want to say, the late 80s to scrapyard, where it's still on its wheels with the wings on and the tail on, just with a bit of a buckle where the cockpit is.
But you were saying that the interesting thing is the 109E, Fs, Gs, and the various sub-variants of those different ones, they're all really different.
Horrible people. Why couldn't they just make them all the same?
Well, this is one of the big questions that one always asks on all matters of journalism.
How really different?
So if you stood back 50 yards, an F and a G would look exactly the same.
Yeah.
An E is a very, very different aeroplane. It's of the earlier line of aeroplanes with the earlier wing.
Yep.
All that Condor Legion stuff, the A's to E.
So it's like the difference between an old Mini and a modern Mini.
Yeah,
they've got kind of the same shape, but they're actually completely different.
The main thing with an F and a G, it's an engineer's aeroplane, and then someone at some point mentioned to the engineer that someone was going to have to fly it, and he probably got terribly offended.
Yeah,
because it's a pain of a thing to fly.
Yeah, I mean, I was aware that, of course, about how tricky the 109 could be, particularly if you're kind of a novice. But I'd never thought about that kind of being bumped off a grass strip, and it's just you don't have the experience to deal with it. And it just watch
all the videos you've previously watched now, and it will be a proper eye opener. I mean, if you watch a Spitfire get bounced off, it's a non-event because the Spitfire stalls at about 55 knots, and it's going 55 knots the second you've touched the throttle almost. So you can sort of get bounced off, and you can hold it in the air and fly it off from the bounce. Whereas with the 109, you can hold it in the air with the elevators, but it's rolling left rapido.
Regardless, right.
No matter what you do, you can stand on the rudder and do your best, but you need to be quite quick-witted about it.
And is that just a fundamental design flaw?
Yes.
I mean, is that kind of because it's designed in 1934?
Yeah,
and it's just
then they've sacrificed to get the speed out of it. They've sacrificed the slow end of the airframe, haven't they?
And in the air, interestingly, the low-speed handling is all right, primarily because you haven't got takeoff power on. It's that combination of high power, high torque, particularly with the Daimler-Benz, and low speed, that it just doesn't work.
This is why these things need to be kept flying, though, isn't it? To maintain contact with the physical business of flying the aircraft and the actual things that the airframe offers a pilot. I mean, there's no one more experienced at flying these things than you, and you're saying, well, you know what I mean. And you're saying, and this thing is tricky. So imagine being a 20-year-old
that's it.
lad with 100 hours in your logbook on trainers. And
the primary difference now is that people like myself and most people thrashing about in these things these days, we've all flown sort of light aerobatic aeroplanes, which are pretty skittish compared to your average aeroplane, and this to us is almost that in slow motion. But jumping straight from something like a tiger moth or a pilatus or whatsoever it may be is quite exciting.
So that's the Spitfire's come round, he's touched down, he's taken off again.
He's got to do 2 landings.
He's got to do 2 landings, yeah.
But Richard, I mean, when this 109 F4 gets airborne in early October.
Yes, no commitment from me there.
But I mean, your test pilot who's flying that, he's gonna have a few nerves in the stomach, isn't he?
I wouldn't think so. No, I mean he certainly will have flown Bruchons a lot, so
so he'll know.
He'll know. And the engine's been on.
And you got a lovely tarmac track, so you're not
and
going
the
to get
engine's
bumped.
been on a test stand in Germany. It's been tested to within an inch of its life.
Right. Okay.
Sorry, in Austria.
Where did the engine come from?
It came from Sweden, actually.
Right.
It was in a Saab B21, which is that weird pusher thing that Saab had.
Yeah.
So it was a brand new engine made for one of those, never used.
Right.
So it's a lovely,
Because Merlins are relatively easy to come by, right?
Yeah, they're like boat anchors, paperweights. They're everywhere.
Right.
But Daimler-Benz is much harder to find, primarily because they made less of them.
Yeah.
And then a lot of them ate themselves at a young age, whereas Merlins are somewhat more reliable.
Well, let's move on into, because what we've done, dear listener, is we've
got stuck at a
we got
Messerschmitt.
2 meters into the hangar in our effort to go round the hangar. Got stuck at the Messerschmitt, but we're right now approaching this Thunderbolt. Project number 92838-R, US Army model P47D-40-RA, Army Air Force serial number 45-49192. I mean, this is a beast.
Looks like
Okay, Rich and I were talking about this earlier on, and we were talking about the oil tank. Guess how much that oil is kept in there?
Oh, I don't know.
23 gallons.
23 gallons
23
of oil.
gallons
to
of
keep it
oil.
going.
Of oil.
Oil?
Yeah.
Of oil.
Right.
The whole green tank.
To keep the thing going.
Yeah.
Is it leaky by any chance?
It is a bit at the moment. I mean, funnily enough, we don't get through it like they probably used to. But yes, I guess they were didn't want it to run out. I think it's fair to say.
Yeah. I mean, it's perched right up next to a Mark 9 Spitfire, sort of hanging over its wing. In fact, its props sort of have got the Spitfire's wing kind of inside the span of the propeller. If anything was going to show you the difference in scale between these two aircraft, it's having them this cheap by a jowl like this. It's quite amazing. I mean, it does look like it's about to mount the Spitfire.
It looks like an
rather like
already.
a Dachshund and a Chihuahua.
The next one.
It looks like one of those appalling dog moments. I mean, it's vast, isn't it?
It is a big thing. I think it was the heaviest fighter of the war.
Yeah.
7 tons, isn't it?
Yeah, it's one of those things, isn't it? It's horses for courses. It's an escort fighter, so it needed to be big to have lots of gas. It needed to be good at altitude, so it needed some kind of, turbo supercharger, which it had rather randomly in the rear end of the fuselage. So then all of a sudden you've got to run your exhaust to the back of the aeroplane and your induction to the back of the aeroplane. So you need this big deep fuselage to get it under the cockpit, and this is what you end up with.
But I mean, you were saying earlier on that if you had to go to war in Second World War, this is the one you choose to fly. Not a Mustang.
No.
Not a
just
Spitfire.
a very well armed and a very well armoured aeroplane. The armour plate behind the seat is large and thick, and that's what I want if I'm going to war. And I want enough ammunition that I'll get bored of shooting it before I run out.
Because we all know about the kind of 14.7 seconds worth of firing speed on a firing rate on a Spit 1 and Hurricane 1, but how much ammunition can this take?
It's sarcastically large amount, I think it's best to say.
It's a great big wing, and it's four.
Yeah.
It's
I did find this bit of information, which I've never considered before.
Great big wing, and 850
standing
cals,
underneath
isn't
it. If you look fairly well, most of that star and bar is the ammo bay, and it's four belts for 50s, but they're big long belts. I couldn't tell you how long, but we could look it up in the manual.
I'd love to know. I really would.
Yeah.
But lovely elliptical wing. I mean, they're things of beauty when you see them flying in the air as well.
Is. And it was, above 30,000 feet. They say there was nothing better than it, and most of the time was spent above 30,000 feet in a lot of machines. It really is to this, what the Hurricane is to the Spitfire. This is to the Mustang. It was the workhorse. It did all of the escorting really up until the Mustang turned up in 44. So it was
but it isn't outclassed by the Mustang, strictly speaking, is it?
No, they're just different things.
Yeah.
I mean, it can carry a large external payload. It's still got loads of internal fuel. Phenomenal ground attack platform, primarily just because of the amount of abuse it could take. I mean, I've seen a phenomenal video of Focke-Wulf 190 gun camera chasing one of these, and unfortunately for the old Thunderbolt, the Focke-Wulf will turn inside it quite comfortably, as evidenced by this footage.
Yeah.
And this Focke-Wulf is just pounding this Thunderbolt, and it just keeps going.
Yeah.
Does it get away?
Yep. Just keeps turning and getting shot, and eventually the Focke-Wulf runs out of ammo, and this guy just probably turns and flies 4 hours home.
Why do you think that it's the Mustang though that gets the headlines?
Good to look at, isn't it?
Well, it is. Yeah. It's a prettier.
Because it can fly all the way to Berlin and back.
But these can too, can't they?
No,
not quite.
Almost.
Close, no coconut.
But it's also, subjectively, the Mustang is a prettier plane than this, isn't it?
It is. It's got some more creature comforts, and I mean, I think a lot of it is simply by the fact that there are more Mustangs surviving. Yeah. So there is more interest in it because it's simply an easier thing to access.
Right.
Primarily because the Mustang was used up until the, whatever it was, I think early 80s by some air forces.
Yeah. I mean, of course, I'm looking at that. I mean, that does look quite complicated. You've got the cowlings off, and we're looking at this great big radial.
Great big radial,
It does look complicated.
It's not, when you get into it, it's not actually that bad. But it's a bit of a pain. It's a daunting thing when it first turns up, put it that way.
I can't tell you what a pleasant backdrop this is.
It's not bad, is it? And have you flown this yourself?
Yeah.
And how is it to fly?
It's lovely, actually. It looks like it should be really heavy, but it isn't. It's a Mustang is actually heavier on the controls than one of these.
Right.
It's very easy to fly, which I think is so important for a fighter, that you can put someone of very low experience in it and they'll survive.
Well, also they've got other things to do than fly the aircraft. They've got to have their eyes peeled, and they've got to be looking, and they've got to be taking into account what's going on around them and all that.
Flying needs to be low, doesn't it? And it really is in that. There's very little to do. So no, a fine machine.
And what else have we got in it?
Well,
I mean, let's go on. We're going under the Thunderbolt wing right now, everybody. Right, now what have we got here?
This is a Mark 12 Spitfire.
Mark 12?
I'm going to say it's the Mark 12.
Yeah.
They only made 100 of them. And this is...
And what's the thing about the Mark 12?
Yeah, it's a Mark 5 with a Griffin in it. So it was the first production Griffin variant of the Spitfire.
Right.
Honestly, other than a couple of beefings up here and there to accommodate the massive extra horsepower of the Griffin, it doesn't have any great changes.
So did they put a bigger tail on it? Because that's
slightly bigger rudder.
Right.
But that was it.
That's it.
But is it still the kind of rounded tail, or is it the pointed tail?
It's the pointed one, like that Mark 8's got over there, or 8 or 9 or whatever you want to call it. It is an 8, but only because the tail wheel goes up and down. So I mean, it is, Geoffrey Quill, one of the very well-known Spitfire test pilots, this was his favourite variant of the Spitfire, which tells you something. Probably not for the uninitiated, but actually when you've done a load, getting into what is, Mark 5 is unquestionably one of, if not the nicest handling variant of the Spitfire.
Right. Give
that 1800 horsepower, and I think you'll be quite happy with the performance.
And when do you think this will be flying?
That's a fantastic question. I like the way you worded it. It's one of those things, it could be flying in 6 months. It's just when those 6 months are, I couldn't make any commitment to. But it's all wired, it's plumbed, it's really, the real snag is the wings are those wings just there, which notably are a bit skeletal. So they need the skins fitting to them, which are all cut and drilled and painted, but it's a matter of time. And these things, it's time consuming to build one of these, and it's particularly time consuming to do it properly.
So beautiful.
It's amazing to see them, isn't it?
And the tactile thing of it. I mean,
you do want to stroke it.
These early ones with the mushroom head rivets on the outside. There's something great about rubbing them. You can see actually where this sky colour here, which is the colour of the coast, these have been rubbed so much they got grubby fingerprints on them. We have to clean it before we even finish rebuilding it.
You said question of time. I mean, how many hours does building a Mark 12 Spitfire take? And you're not doing all of it because some of it's subcontracted.
We've been at it since I was 19. And I'm not 19 no more. The engine, obviously, we subcontract. We don't build the engines ourselves. Propeller, the same. You tend to send that out. Everything else on this particular aeroplane we've done here, we've built a lot of this fuselage and restored everything we possibly could. I mean, it's years, honestly, to do it properly, and it's years for more than one person. To get this from just being a bare fuselage to this standard took 2 guys 6 months, and then that's not including the wiring. So it's no small feat, and it's a long way to go yet. From where it is, as I say, it needs 4 guys 6 months at least.
And I guess one of the big problems is people that know how to do this stuff, they're not exactly growing on trees, are they?
No, they're few and far between. And the ones that do know how to do this stuff, funnily enough, they've already got a job.
And exciting projects in the future?
Really, it's just the 109s for me. I'm really keen to see them done. We've got the Tempest 5 on the way, though,
yes,
from Florida.
I'm really, really excited about that.
I'm trying to not be excited about it.
How can you not be excited?
Under control, just rocking back and forth gently every now and then.
But to see that fly, I mean, that's just going to be amazing.
It's going to be a big job. You know, I'm very confident we can get it done, but I'm terribly worried that we might bump into a stumbling block somewhere, which is why I'm trying to keep it under control. But yes, it's in a box, on its way, on a ship. So,
amazing. Well, it'll be amazing to see it.
Yeah.
With that great big chin of it.
Oh, definitely. That's already here.
Is it?
Yeah. Big chin. The radiator is, isn't it?
The big chin.
And that's the sound of the Spitfire returning. I think that's a good point of punctuation for us, actually. The Spitfires come in, we've got a brew on.
Yep.
And then we're going flying, aren't we, Jim? I think.
Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed.
The weather holds.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Richard.
No worries.
Actually, that's actually a perfect end piece, isn't it?
We'll see you all soon.
And make sure, people, you all come to Sywell Air Show in June.
Sywell Air Show. Thanks for listening. Cheerio.
Cheerio.